We'll talk about boards today. What are boards? I'm a lawyer by training, but I will not talk about legal rules, and I'll explain a little bit about that, why that is, why I think we should not do that so much. What is a board? The way that I look at it, it's the combination of a group of executive people who actually run the company and a group of non-executives who work with them in different roles and different positions, and collectively we call them the board. Boards are becoming more and more important. Why is that? Because we've seen crises. The first crisis in this century is what I call a governance crisis. A crisis where we believe the governance of company has failed. Enron, WorldCom, Tyco and all the others in the United States. Some fine Dutch examples here in the Netherlands and Parmalat in Europe as the icons of scandals, failure, and we believe there was something wrong in the governance of those companies. Something wasn't right. And the particular question was raised, where were the non-executive directors? What have they been doing? How did they not prevent the scandals and the failures that we saw? Now, economists have a very particular way of looking at governance questions in general, which determines how they see what's going on in boards and why boards are as they are. And the predominant theory is an agency theory. They distinguish principals, mainly shareholders, as owners of the company. And on the other side are the managers, the top management, executives who actually run the company as agents for the principals. And rational economic behavior, the thinking is, assumes that these two groups have conflicting interests. Principals as owners have the financial outcome, benefits, profits or losses of the process that the agents are running, while the agents not necessarily are having exactly the same profits and losses. They have different agendas, different things that they would like to achieve. And because these two conflict, there's a risk that principals do not get what they should be getting. So from an economic perspective, the drive is to do two things: to align the interest of top management with the interest of shareholders, and to have these managers, the top managers, monitored much more strictly on behalf of the managers by what we call non-executive directors. So more monitoring and alignment of interest. Those are the typical solutions that economists come up with. Now there's a problem with these incentives. Incentives work well, but very often they work way too well. There's a theory that we find now in behavioral finance and economy, how incentives, particularly financial incentives, crowd out our intrinsic behavior to do well, to perform well. There's a new strand of research indicating also it's not just that, it's not our motivation is affected, but even our cognitive abilities in different economic complex situations, even these are affected by the fact that we have strong financial incentives which focus us on a certain particular outcome that must be achieved. And I'll give you 3 examples where I think we fail, or at least it shows that we can't do it completely by regulation. The downside is that the more independence you require to sit on the board, the less expertise you may have on the board. If anybody who has, and I'm overcharging a little bit, anybody who has a formal relationship with the company through which he could understand what the company is about is excluded, because then you're not independent. You have the paradoxical situation that all the non-executive directors completely depend on the executives for any information and any insight about the company. Diversity, the way that we think about it from a corporate governance perspective and not a social project to make sure that we have more women on every layer of society, which is valuable in itself. I'm talking from a governance perspective. Diversity can be good for the quality of decision and arguments that go around in boards. The more opinions on the table, the higher the possibility, the likelihood that you'll come to the right decision. It is not, we can't say that the more diversity we have, the more or the better the boards will always operate. There's a limit to that as well. And one limit is that if you have a completely diversified board according to all sorts of factors, gender, international, age, etc., you are going to lose some level of social fabric. People knowing each other and know each other's frame of reference. What are you talking about? And there are chances increase that you miscommunicate. That you think you talk about the same aspect of business or strategy or understanding of whatever's going on, and people have very different views about what they actually think about when they hear that term. Finally, competence, something that we really want on boards. We want people who really understand the business and understand what they're doing in that board. The difficulty with this type of research is that you actually don't know whether it's just the competence at the board level that made the difference or whether there are many other factors that are going on. My argument with these two authors was, when I spoke with them, I would expect that not just the level of competence of non-executive directors differs, but the level of competence of the executive directors. And the staff very much differs from public banks to private banks, and probably that has a much more important impact on performance than what is happening at the non-executive level. Whatever we regulate on independence, diversity, competence, that's not going to guarantee us board performance.
It all starts with this. I think this is really important. I get serious now. What is a company all about? And I think there is a fundamental mistake in this whole agency approach, because it does not capture what companies are all about. But if you follow the logic of this agency approach, you end up with the kind of models that are shown for you on the left-hand side in terms of thinking about what matters in a company. If you think differently about what a company is all about, you go to the person on the right-hand side. Companies are first and foremost an institution that produces goods, services, that serves customers in a world. It serves markets. And if you go and visit a company, you talk to the people, and you ask what drives their behavior, if it's a healthy company, it's right that. If it's not, you're in deep trouble. What brings in the end a company together is, if you think about it, is a set of values. We have our values. You see them here. It's about focusing on our customers' future first. It's about embracing entrepreneurial thinking and actually acting. It's about developing people, because it's in the end, as Jaap rightly said, it's all about people. It is about a culture where everybody, in every layer of an organization, people have the courage and the curiosity to question, why are we doing this? Not only at the board level, but throughout the company. And then there's, of course, the other element. There needs to be integrity and responsibility, because companies have a very important societal responsibility. Let's, as a consequence, not forget what success in the end means. Good governance is an important element. It's just one element of key successful elements to be successful. It starts with having strong market positions. It is to have good, solid, detailed business strategies and portfolio strategies, you could argue. It is about having the right kind of people in your organization. It's about, very important, creating the right kind of culture. We can talk for hours about what a culture is. We can do that later on. And then, of course, good governance is not unimportant. It is a factor. But I have seen companies with a pretty bad corporate governance structure who are extremely successful. And we have seen many examples of companies that have an excellent governance, that meet they tick all the boxes of all the codes and more, and it went bankrupt. It's a complex interplay. And in the Western world, at this point in time, we have a tendency to over-focus on the formalities, because we have forgotten what companies are all about. What are the key roles of non-executives? I don't try to be complete, but anyhow, the ones I thought about when I made this slide. Very important. Appointment of the key people. Assessment of the performance of key executives. And the remuneration. That's very, very important. You could argue that the most important things that boards do, non-executive boards, is the appointment. And as a consequence, if they fire people. The most important thing. That's a consequence of the first point. They don't execute. They delegate execution. Secondly, very important, if there's trust, if there's openness, if there is capability and knowledge, the points you made, non-executives can be extremely important sounding boards for executives. Very often outside the formal meetings, but very important. Use them for their judgment, use them for their experience. Just by telling a story, you must have the experience as well. If you have a problem, you can't solve it, you go to somebody and that person is open just to listen and you tell your story. Once you've told your story, the other side may not even have said one word, you suddenly know the solution. Now, are board black boxes? They're not. They're not, because a black box is something where you see what goes in and you see what goes out, or you have no idea what's going on inside that organization. Let's be clear. Here, of course, the codes and a lot of the other rules and regulations in the financial services, clearly more than in other industries, come in. A lot is actually very well documented. And particularly when you see, if you're a listed company in the US, and you look at what's being all disclosed there, I have the impression people don't read it sometimes, but a lot is disclosed. Enormous amounts of information. People always ask for it. Once you provide it, they don't look at it anymore. And then finally, do we need complete transparency? Absolutely not, because indeed, if the trainer of the Dutch soccer team wants to discuss his strategy for a game, he closes the door, the press is out, and he thinks about what the tactics are going to be. And of course, in a company, a lot of things are going on, and you'd rather would not like to disclose that. That's not only for company strategies, not only for commercial secrets. It's also about how you talk about people. People make mistakes. You have behavioral issues with people. You discuss that. Just imagine you want to disclose all these kind of things. It would be disastrous, as you rightly said. There would be no learning anymore. You would create exactly the opposite. No openness. People in the hallways just discussing things, whispering. So it is very important that we do not create maximum transparency. Maximum transparency creates the opposite of what you want to achieve. Now, what does this all come down to? I think first, good governance is indeed a necessary but not sufficient and overestimated condition for success of a company. Boards are no black boxes, certainly not more than university boards, I would like to say as well, I guess. Boards can be pretty effective when there is a shared vision, a strategy, when there's mutual trust, when there's clarity of roles, and there's good governance. Is an effective board a guarantee for success? No. Companies will continue to go bankrupt. Companies will continue to fail. And I think it's very important that society accepts that. That's an element of our system. It's a system that creates hygiene as well. It's creative destruction, according to Schumpeter. And if we think it's unacceptable that companies go bankrupt, like system banks, they're not really companies and we have to treat them differently. Or we have to split them up so that we can actually manage the effect of companies going bankrupt. But let's, for God's sake, not try to avoid companies failing at any price. Nobody will learn anymore and we will stifle innovation and competition. Thank you very much.